Well, hello, and welcome to my cellar. You just got a little sneak preview of the GaryCon 13 t-shirt. I'll tell you, those guys at GaryCon, led by Luke, are clever. They sent all their swag bags out to the DMs in advance. So now we got to show up and do it. I'll see you there. I got 4 games going. Okay, let's dive right in, shall we? My favorite AD&D book is the Deities and Demigods. Are there any interesting stories around the creation of that book? Yeah, there are. I love that the AD&D world is connected to real-world mythos. It's one of the main reasons I stick with this version of the game. The art is amazing. There's something awesome about seeing the stats and powers of the various pantheons listed out like character sheets. It's my go-to book if I'm feeling stuck or in need of inspiration to start a new plot thread. Our setting deals mostly with Egyptian, Central American, and Finnish mythos, and that cosmic drama trickles down to the prime material plane. Cool. Sounds like you got a hell of a theological cloud going there. Love it. The Deities and Demigods I'm familiar with was the first one, the small one. It was a supplement to original D&D, so I can only speak to that primarily. It's alleged. Kind of move over here where I'm in the middle. It's alleged to have been written by 2 people, and while technically that's correct, not everybody did equal work on that, and I have uncredited work on it. But keep in mind that we originally put that out trying to establish how silly some of the complaints that we were getting actually were. Golly, my group went to Valhalla, and they crossed the bridge and they defeated, and they killed Thor and they killed Odin. What do I do next week? And we were trying to point out that that probably shouldn't happen, and you may be doing something incorrectly. That's really why it came out at first. It was to give a point of reference that no, you aren't going to go to cross the Bifrost Bridge and kill all the Valar and then, finish off Thor when Thor's got 400 hit points and maybe you got 80. Maybe, come on, let's get real here. And I always felt that if you're going to take on named deities, you're going to find out that they're immune to most everything. After all, they're deities. All right. Never been to a gaming convention before, but if I ever go to one anytime soon, it'll be in Texas before anywhere else. And you know what? It sounds like you're from Texas or that part of the country. You couldn't do any better than to go to the North Texas RPG Convention. It's in the Dallas area, and it's really, really interesting RPG convention. And primarily, but there are some boards and there are some minis. And of course, one of the minis is cherry racing, which I infected them with years and years ago. And that virus is mutated into something barely recognizable. But hey, they're having fun, and I'm all for fun. Hearing you respond to my comments made my day. Thanks. Hope you have a nice week. Well, hey, if I didn't get comments, I wouldn't have a show or vlog or whatever the hell, podcast, whatever the hell this is. Yeah, let's decide. I'll take votes. What is this I'm doing? But if I didn't have any of those, I wouldn't have anything to do because don't have the ego or the desire to go on every week for 40 minutes just blathering on about whatever I thought was important that week. Another interesting comment in reference to the additions that we were talking about earlier. 3.5 is as far away from OD&D as I have wandered. Well, that's cool. I'm not one of those persons that feels I got to have every iteration or something or try out everything. Of course, I'm one of those guys. I'm one of those people who says, "Hey, it ain't broke, don't fix it." Back in the day, did you play with miniatures? And do you these days? I've often heard said Gygax himself never used maps and miniatures, but I wonder if these stories are true or apocryphal. As far as I know, they're true. Do I play with minis? No. I play miniatures, on tabletop and with miniatures games, but I don't play with minis in role playing or in D&D. Now, I can remember in years past going to, primarily, I think this happened at Boston, and it was an adventure involved going up a long river, pulling a raft, and all of a sudden everybody pulls out these minis, and they're wondering what to do with them. So I ripped up a sheet of paper. I said, "Okay, here, here, here's the raft. If that makes you happier," and it did. And so they were careful about where they placed it. So if something came up in a certain place and attacked the raft, they knew who got it and whatever. But no, I've never used minis on a tabletop. I don't care if a player wants to bring their favorite mini that represents their character and put it there in front of them and whatever. That's fine. I understand that, and it's cool. But no, I don't use them. I'm completely theater of the mind, which means no physical crutches. It's all up here, and of course here where you roll your dice. Did Gary? No. This may shock you, but hey, the players were responsible for making their own maps and keeping them up to date. Is that a shocker? It seems to be nowadays. We sat down with a blank piece of graph paper and a pencil, and if Gary was feeling in a good mood, he'd tell us what corner to start in, or where on the page to start. And if he wasn't, well, it's how you ended up with a map that went across 3 different pages, because it did. So, no, he never gave out maps. Now, I have given out partial maps, crude maps, half of a copy of a map in various adventures. And the only reason I do that is to make it go quicker. Let's not lose a lot of time on the mapping when we can be playing. But when you played in Gary's games or you played in my old games, you made your own maps. You had to keep them up to date. Occasionally, whoever the map maker was, and every group in the early days had a map maker or 2 or 3, but they occasionally would have to redo the maps because the old ones had gotten smudged or whatever. But no, Gary didn't use figures. Not that I'm aware of, no game that I ever played in. If we needed a physical representation of where we were in relationship to other items or things or foes, we'd grab a handful of dice. Okay, the orcs are all the orange ones, and we're every other color. And that was only in extreme circumstances. So they're not apocryphal, they're true. Gary didn't catch any slack. He didn't give you any free, didn't give you any guide, no Michelin guide to Greyhawk. No way. Do you think a player's class should influence the treasure items when opening a chest? How can we be fair to all classes when giving magical treasures? How can we judge a magical item's value? Who said you had to be fair? In just about everything I've written, and just about everything I've played, the majority of magical items were either weapons for the fighters or for those PCs. They could use a weapon depending upon what it was, dagger, sword, and magical items. So I in later years, when I've been writing up stuff, I try to make sure that I give the potential buyer of the adventure a broad enough palette to choose from, so that there's everything there. And if you're worried about it as a DM, well, make up a couple of things for whatever class you think isn't getting enough. Otherwise, finding magic is finding magic is finding magic. The key word being finding, not retrieving, not buying, but finding. And you find what you find. Um, I've always tried to make magic in an area consistent with what was going on there. If it was say an agricultural based or centered, well then there'd be agricultural stuff, magic seeds and plows and scythes and whatever. And if it was nautical, then I try to tailor it, not for who's going to get it, but what kind of magic it is. And if you don't like a lot of wizardly magic in there, well, tough. Don't put it in. And wizards got to suck it up, and they just try that much harder to find something that that they want, that they can use. Um, I always found it was really funny when a non-magic user found something a magic user wanted, and no, I can't use it, but you want it that bad. Well, what do you give it? What are you going to give me for it? And PCs who were shrewd made good deals for something they couldn't use anyway. But fair is if you're worried about fair, then simply put out, strew about an equal number of stuff that clerics get advantage from, that wizards could get advantage from, that fighters could get advantage from, that rogues, I'm learning to say that, could get advantage from. If you got a druid in the campaign, this is the carrot, and the stick, and these are carrots. And if you want your people to keep playing, well, then you're going to give them more carrots. And if you don't give them any carrots, they're going to go wander off to somebody else's garden and look for carrots there. Easy peasy. Okay. Good to hear about the full. Yeah, I'm glad too. I got 2 shots. Hope we enjoy my first Wednesday night with the crew soon. Yeah. 2 of us have had both our shots. 2 of us had 1 and are getting. I think they're both getting them their seconds this week. And we've decided that 4 out of 5 is sufficient herd immunity, because our one buddy is much younger than us, and he'll be a couple months anyway behind us. And now if the distribution keeps ramping up. But anyway, once we hit 4 out of 5 or 3 out of 4, in case of a couple that we like to socialize with, that's herd immunity. Still going to be smart. Went out in grocery today, masked up and everything. Oh, speaking of masks, my magical sister, the seamstress, the wizard with thread and needle, made me up a couple of new masks. She's the one that made that beautiful pot leaf mask that's on my Facebook page. She made me up some masks with dragons on them. So I'm going to change my Facebook page to one with instead of the leaf, I'll have an oriental imperial blue dragon with gold. It's gorgeous. All right. If time permits, time always permits on this thing. Could you tell us the development of Boot Hill and Gamma World? I didn't know much in Gamma World at all, except what went on in that pressure cooker up there. Somebody walk in, go, "Hey, I'm trying to do this or this. How do you think, And I'd have input in that way. But in terms of the overall, no, I play tested a little bit. Now, Boot Hill, That's a different story. I believe that Boot Hill came out while I was still at college, because I recall Deathless Bob actually died in a Boot Hill game also. We'd taken a break from D&D and decided to play Boot Hill for a week or two. Just mainly because I was busily designing the next phase of the campaign, um, and I needed a break, so we played Boot Hill. Boot Hill is best described as like a skirmish game. Each player represents, has a character on the board, and individual shots aimed, etc. It's a skirmish level type game. We played it because it was fun. Because Brian had a thing about TV cowboys and real cowboys, and I printed a couple of his one or two articles that he wrote up about how somebody would stack up in terms of the Boot Hill stats. It was fun, just shooting, having high noon duels out in the street. Um, there were a lot of things referenced in the DMG, because we were still striving mightily to get people to think outside the box, whatever their box was, and to look at moshing in other stuff, converting it and making it suitable for fantasy. On hit points, I tend to take the original interpretation. Hit points are an abstract measure of one's ability to avoid the fatal blow, stamina hack, fighting mojo, whatever. To a further extent than you might, Tim, you've said in the past, if someone's restrained or asleep, you generally have a coup de grace attack to take them out automatically. And while I would agree in some cases, in others I could see hit points being used to save such a character. Take a character like Conan's ability to sleep with one eye open, so to speak. If an assassin would get the drop on such a character and try to stab them in their sleep, it's often narratively appropriate for Conan to wake up at the last second and be able to wrestle the attacker. Well, that's because there's a narrative already in place. Robert E. Howard's narrative. In D&D, as the sessions progress in the campaign, shouldn't we be creating our narrative? Just a thought. You might model this with some specific extra ability, like giving the character a save to wake up in time, but you could instead just interpret their hit points as an expression of this ability. In this case, the assassin sure has a bonus to hit and or damage when they attack the sleeping hero, enough to surely kill many lesser individuals, but not enough to slay our sleeping badass. Not because the assassin's blade can't realistically end the hero's life, but because the hero's hit points indicate they're just lucky enough or skilled and wary enough to sleep with one eye open, whatever, that they wake up at the last second and avoid that fatal thrust. Also, as a side, I feel the first level sleep spell is powerful enough without letting it be used to automatically murder multiple beings, so my treatment of hit points extends to that spell as well. Okay. If you and your group are happy playing that way, I'm not going to say it's wrong. I'm going to say it's not the way I do it. It doesn't make any sense. You're using fiction, a made-up story, a made-up swords and sorcery story, and casting that. If you get somebody with 100 hit points someday, then as a DM you can say, yeah, you got it, man. You got cats alert senses, etc., etc. But hey, you're asleep. That assassin, that rogue, whoever comes up, that guy who's just pissed off at you, he's got a nice long poignard, and he puts it right through your neck. You're dead, baby. All right. Even though I stick to single axis alignment, law versus chaos, a la Moorcock, I really like the AD&D idea of devils, lawful versus demons, chaotic, as a malevolent Manichaean cosmological conflict. When this dynamic gets revealed to players, like if a cleric or paladin encounters a horrific being they assume to be some sort of demon, but realize it was the same alignment as then, it shakes the black and white good versus evil versus assumptions they have, and the universe seems a lot colder and uncaring. With regard to clerics, lawful, they all turn undead, but might control rather than destroy them if they worship a devil or a god of death. But they're still lawful. Chaotic clerics or anti-clerics don't turn undead at all, but instead can dement mortals, like a cultist out of a Lovecraft story, exposing others to the horror of their god and driving them mad. Okay, that's what you want to do. That's okay. That's what I feel is the disadvantage of a two-pole alignment. Too much gray. Not to say that there isn't gray with a 4, but there's just way too much. My opinion. So here's another one. So you're saying your commanding undead is an act of evil. What do you think of good aligned characters commanding undead? Are undead necessarily evil? That remind me of another LOTR chapter. All right, Lord of the Rings chapter of Aragorn commanding undead who are undead because they were cursed for an old oath breaking and needed to be relieved. Okay, once again, you're citing as an example a single episode as part of the overall mythos in Middle Earth. A single episode. You can always make up a great exception to a generalized rule. And oftentimes, if you stop and think about it, there's a lot of that goes on in adventures, making adventures, writing adventures. All right, there's a lot of that goes on. So, again, I'm going to assume we're back at a 4-point axis alignment here. Is commanding undead an act of evil? Yes, unless you have this fancy exception to Aragorn, and though it might be actually a little evil, the greater good is served by allowing these people to work off their cosmic IOUs. I don't have a problem with the dichotomy there. Good characters commanding undead? No, you're not good if you're commanding undead. Undead gets its horror and its awe from the fact that it's unnatural. Dead are supposed to stay dead. There's a certain abhorrence to the idea of dead coming back. The fact that dead have been reanimated or resurrected is evil. In the ethic that most of the educated world would recognize. So, okay, did Aragorn lead them, or did Aragorn allow them to join the battle and therefore work off their cosmic IOU? But I would certainly treat number one, if I encountered a clerical looking dude telling a bunch of zombies to attack me, I would automatically assume they're evil. And really, good and evil is the first decider. Lawful and chaotic comes later, my opinion. Have I ever used a cursed sword as an adventure before? Can you reward a player that uses one for a long time? Can a cursed sword be disguised and really be a +3 if remove curse is used or the player uses it for a set duration? The sword will function as cursed until the spell's broken. Sure, I've not ever done it. I don't see the point for screwing with the players like that and giving them something that's eventually going to drain their life and kill them, or lead them into something terrible. Now, sword with an ego. Is it a curse to have a high ego, a magical sword with a high ego? Oh, hell yes, it's a curse. It's going to be whistling in the dark, hoping to attract something so you can kill it and it can live in its, revel in its glory and gory. Can you remove a curse? Well, you probably could. It depends on the level of the characters. I always figured if they couldn't do it themselves, there would be a way to find somebody that could do it for them if they had the right compensation. Usually, a wheelbarrow or two full of loot, but it could be done. But there again, why would you want to? Unless it was, like super nicely made and had pretty runes carved up and down the blade. Why would you want to? It's cursed. Leave it alone. Destroy it so that no bad guy will get a hold of it at a later date. Okay, a question on running games in an old school way. I've been waiting for this question someday, and now it is. A few weeks ago, I was reading through the BX rules, and on page X59, under the heading "Dungeon Mastering as a Fine Art," the following is said, but I rolled it. A common mistake most DMs make is to rely too much on random die rolls. An entire evening can be spoiled if an unplanned wilderness encounter on the way to the dungeon goes badly for the party. I had that happen once playtesting the thing that I wrote for Iron Wind. The DM must use good judgment in addition to random tables. Encounters should be scaled to the strength of the party and should be in harmony with the theme of the adventure. This seems to fly in the face of what many in the OSR have led me to believe, often saying that the game doesn't always need to be fair to the players and it's on players to win the challenge. This also touches on the recent discussion of rolling in the open. This section clearly recommends changing encounter results if it seems too difficult. How were encounters handled back in the day? Did Gary pull punches at times when the party wasn't on par? I don't know. If the DM does it right, you have no idea. Because most players would resent feeling that they're being mollycoddled or something like that, babied or pampered. I believe that the DM's job is to guide the creation of the story. I believe that the story is accumulated accounts of actions by the party in concert or separately. I don't put stuff in an adventure that's grotesquely unfair. Every monster I ever created has a weakness. Every adventure I've ever written has solutions that don't require, mandatory blood and guts. There are ways to work around. If I were a person using charts and oops, there's a wandering monster, and oops, I rolled, some god horrible roll of 7 ogres. Am I going to let those, just because the die said so, should I have 7 ogres attack the 5 party members, none of whom is over 5th level? Only if I'm getting tired with these people or their characters and I want to croak them and start again. You shouldn't know that I fudged. I should roll. Yep. Oh, you just encountered 3 ogres. You shouldn't know that I rolled and it said 7. The fact is, you've had a random encounter. It's a significant foe. And it should test you. Hey, 3 ogres can kill you, can kill the whole party. If the party rolls crappy, the ogres roll well, etc. With 7 ogres, it's almost certain that they're going to beat snot out of the party and possibly kill a good chunk of them. So what's the point? I'm not trying to hone them in the anvil of conflict or anything like that. I'm just kind of gently guiding the story along. And then by guiding, I mean I'm just hopefully at every decision, every point of where you come to for a decision, I've gotten 2 or 3 directions they can go. I'm not going to force them down. I'm not going to force them to take what's behind door number 1. But I'm going to give them door number 1, door number 2, and door number 3, and they can make their own choices. You got to figure, why are you here gaming? Why are you playing this game? Okay, most of us game for social contact and rubbing shoulders. All of us have a little bit of, at least a little bit of competitiveness in our spirits. I don't see, stuff can happen. I've written an adventure where there's a lich, a pissed off lich being held in stasis writing a nightmare. If the party ignores all the warning signs, if the party doesn't choose to speak with Undead to find out why that skeleton's standing in front of that building, and they open it up, after all the foreboding you can possibly layer on with a spoon, the lich comes out and croaks them all. Well, okay, it happened. But there were ample ways to know what was there before they got there. There were ample ways to find out what was there. There were clues, but they chose to ignore them all. Oh, pardon me. Never fails. Blood sugar drops. That's right. We lose an hour of sleep tomorrow. Yeah. That's why rolling in the open isn't necessarily. If I rolled on a random chart for a random encounter, and then you saw me roll a 12, and then I told you only 3, you know I fudged. So that's another good reason not to roll everything out in the open. I'd argue. All right, now the next 2 are responses to this post. I'd argue people sometimes are a bit too essentialist about things. Many of the stylistic currents in the hobby probably existed in one form or another by 81. It's more a matter of what habits were predominant. Note that the above quote presumes there even are random wilderness encounter tables, something a lot of new school DMs might not even use. Good point. There are some assumptions made in that, but that's okay. Sometimes you have to make some assumptions to be able to formulate your question. If they are this and they do that and this happens, you have to. Well, they're by 81. Yeah, even the obnoxious power gamers were starting to come around by 81, so that's not a bad observation. Okay, now a second response to this. This passage you read is for novice DMs just cutting their teeth. Yes. So you're parsing and picking out and not using context. Use of discretion is self-explanatory when a rolled random encounter or treasure is too powerful for the players. Just because the dice said so doesn't mean I'm going to give you 100,000 gems. I don't care if I rolled a double odd. Tough. That's going to blow the campaign apart. It's going to destroy the economy. Now I can let you have 50, 30,000 of them and still take them away from you without destroying the local economy. Let's see. Old school has a higher level of lethality because the focus in the old style is on play and not on lots of mechanics that augment dice values. Yes, yes, yes. It's about play. Old school has about 4 results. A good roll on a smart play is victory. A bad roll on a smart play, generally save. A good roll on a bad play, victory. And a bad roll on a bad play, defeat. The first 3 results favor the players. The last result requires a new character to be rolled. Well, it's a good observation. Just sitting down and rolling dice and using whatever comes up is wanker behavior. Okay, now we have another RE paracord and other items. Whatever your idea of a D&D world floats your boat into each his own. Those controversial high-tech items can always be redescribed as exotic fantasy magical materials. Well, of course they are. We've been telling you for years. You could tell the people that this magical flame making thing was actually a Zippo. They didn't know it was a Zippo. They just knew that if they took the lid off and spun the wheel, it made sparks and a flame came out. Then one day it didn't come out anymore, and they didn't know why, because the fluid was gone. Anyway, do you remember Tolkien's Elven Rope in Lord of the Rings? Of course I do. And now you want to make a whole thing about Elven Rope and what it's made out of and who made it and all that. Fine. It's one reference out of one fantasy story. You can always, Gary used to have great fun screwing with us when we were doing MA with what we call them, light reads, because the round thing with the glass on one end and a button on the other end, the only thing we had to compare it to was like a really big reed. And he used to screw with it. We'd look at it. It ended up getting turned on. And we'd be blinded in one eye for hours. Or we'd turn it on and shoot a beam in the sky and attract something. And you can always take modern technology and make it sound like it's magic. That's easy. Fine. If you can say you gave your players magic rope. If you have to go on and nitpick that to say that it's paracord, okay, fine. It's magic, so there isn't going to be a lot of it. What it's actually made out of, okay. If you want to assume time travel, dimension travel, whatever, that's fine, okay. But please don't get into the habit of going. And this is something we saw in the late 70s. People get in the habit of looking at one favorite book and fixating on one mechanic or one thing in there and try to pull that out of context and go, why doesn't it work, exactly like I want it to in D&T? Very long argument of why paracord could be Elven Rope. That's fine. Okay. And the last one, of course, we're going to close out on Psionics. I've hardly read this one yet, so I'll be thinking this one up on the fly. Okay, Psionics, first edition AD&D. Mind Flayer has Mind Blast. Psionic Blast versus non-Psionic. But only attack mode B in its monster stats. Well, this is poorly written. I would do then the player cannot Psionic Blast a Psionic character since they do not have attack mode A Psionic Blast. Would I be correct to assume that this is the Achilles heel as in other monster designs, or perhaps an oversight? Mind Flayer only able to employ attack mode B. Mind Thrust is easily defensible versus a psionic opponent. Same can be said for certain devils and demons possessing attack mode E, Psychic Crush, but not the requisite defense mode C, Thought Shield. You're trying to, I'm going to stop right here. You're trying to apply a flawed system, and I think you're overthinking it. We didn't leave any esoteric secret left by me and Gary. Everything, yeah. For me to comment extensively on this as Psionics as seen in first edition, I can't really, because I didn't have anything to do with the recrafting of it. We decided we had to keep it. We weren't going to throw out anything that so many people got fascinated by. Everything I created and a lot of what Gary created, I can't speak to everything Gary created because I wasn't there when he did it. But I do know we shared the philosophy that everything has a weakness. Achilles has his heel. Everything has a weakness. There's something out there that can croak anything, negate anything. Psionics was a flawed system from the beginning. I tend to use it. I would tend to use it as a common sense thing. If they can do it, it can be done back to them. If they can do it, they can defend against it. I would think that would be something that you would learn. Keep in mind again that the original intent was that a minute percentage of the human population or the adventuring population might have a minimal psionic latency. How they got up where they could do it, how they get to where they can deal with the mind flayer or whatever, that's entirely up to you and your campaign. I don't use psionics anymore. And the tiered, structured sense, if I write something in, it's got one shot at you and you get it, or you make your save. Psionics are a part of fantasy, part of sci-fi. It can be addressed to incorporate, pardon me, it can be addressed to incorporate it into your game or not, as you like. You can completely ignore it. Just don't put psionic beasts in there as opponents. If you do, don't make it a tough luck, you're dead. If you want to, study the mind flayer and then throw 4 of them at a group of 6, 8 players. If the mind flayers are played well, they'll do considerable damage. If they're played poorly, they won't. Same goes for the other side. If they have good saving throws, they'll do well. If they don't, they'll fail. All right. That's pretty much all the game stuff I got for tonight. Looking forward to GaryCon next weekend. I will be doing one of these after my session that night because it's about the same time I started anyway. So I'm doing one Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I believe they're at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. And I'm doing one on Sunday. I believe it starts at 11 in the morning. traditionally nobody was around by the afternoon on Sunday, so that's why I did it that way. And plus, my family and my great grandbabies come over on Sunday afternoon, and so I wanted to be clear by then. 4 games of the Wheel of Blame. You really ought to look into it. There's a lot of fun stuff going on. Virtual, we're going to be doing virtual again for a few months. I know that Texas is hoping for maybe 300 people this year in person. Even though I've had both my shots, I had already told Doug I won't be coming down because, number one, I didn't tell this in this detail to Doug, but number one, Texas has got a bullshit, blindfolded, myopic way of dealing with this. And I didn't feel comfortable flying in a big silver metal tube, breathing other people's potential for germs, because I wasn't going to get into any shouting matches on an airplane about some dumbass not wearing their mask. Doug said it's cool. I have told Doug I'm going to be going to Autumn Revel. That's going to be my next one. I'm pretty sure. And when I go up there, I have a couple of donations to make to the Hobby Shop Museum that I'm looking forward to giving to them. So until that time, get your shots. Stay masked. I don't give a damn what state you live in. If you got brains, stay masked. I'm guessing there are not too many people that watch this that play games are dumb enough to deny the science. So I may be preaching to the choir, but that's okay. Stay safe, socially distance. We are beginning to, there is a glimmer way down that tunnel. There is a glimmer of hope. So hang in there. Dodada Gobi. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when the race went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought Psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. PSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Tight with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.